Hey, this is Charles Onyett with IGN, and this is part 2 of my ongoing review and progress of Guild Wars 2 that I'm doing for IGN, and I've been playing for a few days now since getting into Head Start. You can see here my main character is a Norn Guardian, but I wanted to show what other races and professions, which are basically the game's classes, you could pick. So you can pick Asura, and Asura so far seems to have the most personality in the game. They're kind of a comedic race. They're irritable, they are hyper-intelligent, and their storyline has been the most entertaining from what I've seen so far. Norn have been kind of dull, so I wouldn't necessarily pick the... I'm getting into more interesting stuff now with the Norn storyline. And actually, the storylines do give you a degree of choice. So as you get later on, you actually have to pick, which faction you want to join with. So it's not just the same thing every time you play the story. You can actually make choices as to how you want to complete some of the missions later on. So it is becoming more interesting, but it does... The personalities in the Norn storyline aren't so great. Then you've got humans, you've got Char, another interesting race. I think their story's pretty strong. And then Sylvari, which are sort of, they're not tree elves, but it's the elf-like equivalent, but they're actually a mystical people made of trees, and they have kind of an interesting story too. But I really think the Asura is the standout race, even though I didn't pick Asura just because they are smaller than the other races, and I felt like that kind of diminished the impact of the armor designs, which I really like in the game. I think the armor designs are excellent. Anyway, that's an overview of the races. So then the next choice, and I'll go Asura for this purpose, just because I've been clicking on them. You pick male or female, and then you go into class selection. So there are 8 classes in the game. They're called professions. I'm just going to call them classes. You get pet classes like the Ranger and Necromancer, who rely on pets to do some of their abilities. And then you get something like the Thief. The Thief is interesting because the Thief doesn't have a kind of permanent cloak like you might expect from a Thief-type class if you're thinking like WoW Rogue or something like that. The Thief actually has very quick cloaking abilities, so they only last for a couple seconds, very fast movement. So it's definitely a unique style in this kind of class archetype for MMOs. Pretty interesting. Very movement dependent, so you really have to move around with the Thief. The Mesmer kind of is a more magically oriented class, as you might be able to tell from the armor designs here, and creates illusions of him or herself that can help out in an attack. So it's actually more of a complex class to play. Some really interesting mechanics there. Very non-traditional. A more traditional class is the Elementalist, who commands magical elements, so can shoot fire, earth, air, that type of thing, and has a lot of options for combat. Warrior is all about weapons, and very much for somebody who wants to run around with giant weapons and attack up close most of the time, although it can use ranged attacks as well. Then there's the Engineer, who, in very Engineer-style fashion, can drop turrets all over the place to help support a squad and uses guns and can even equip flamethrowers and things like that. And there's the class that I'm playing, which is the Guardian, which can attack up front, but also has a lot of support abilities and can attack from range, actually as almost a caster, really, depending on which weapon you equip. And that is what I'm going to focus on for this commentary, is I'm going to go in and show off some of my Guardian skills that I've been able to unlock so far. So I'm going to log into the game, and hopefully it is operational. There have been some hiccups around launch time. It seems like ArenaNet has sold quite a few copies of the game. They let people know that they'd sold 1 million pre-launch. That was the amount of people that, I guess, pre-purchased the game to get into the Head Start period that started 3 days before the official launch. And so they had about, a little bit over 200,000 concurrents online over the Head Start weekend. And, performance wasn't perfect. A lot of people were having login issues. The trading post, at least the last time I logged in, still wasn't working, and that's the way that you essentially trade items to each other. So that's made crafting a little, more difficult than it necessarily needs to be, because you can't get the component items that you need as much. So you actually have to go out into the world and be like, oh, well, I need more copper. I need to go to the lower level zones to get copper. Fortunately, you can actually still make progress while doing that. So you actually get experience for mining copper, you get experience for crafting things, and the way the leveling system works in the game, you're actually de-leveled. I mean, you don't lose your level, but your character is kind of capped depending on which zone you're in. So I'm just in the Norn main city here, and I'm going to move out to a combat zone. But we can see an example of that if I, for instance, here, I'll go out to some place that isn't snowy, since I've spent a lot of time in snowy territory. I will head out to... where should I go? Breached Wall? I don't know, there's a lot of cattle around this area. I will go over here. But yeah, so you're de-leveled, so you can still gain experience. Enemies aren't just a pushover. Even if you're way higher level, you will sort of be leveled to the cap of that zone, so everything still stays competitive. So yeah, you can't just steamroll over things. The effect of that is that you're never really in a situation where you feel like this all-powerful god, which is a kind of, you know, that's something I sort of miss, because I did like being able, in other MMOs, to be able to go through early level zones and look at creatures that were once able to dominate me that no longer really had any power to even touch me. But at the same time, it means that you don't run through a lot of boring content. So for instance here, I'm essentially scaled to level 20, so this ghost minion is still going to be a bit of a challenge. Of course, I still have my full skill bar unlocked here. Let's see if I can take them. And once I kill these guys, I can just go through some of my Guardian skills. So one of the things that is really important to Guild Wars 2 is movement. You can see my bar here that governs, this is my resource that governs dodging. So I can do 2 dodges, basically, without it needing to regen, and then it will slowly regen. So I don't have unlimited dodges. I need to be really mindful of that and really use them when I need them. So a lot of that has to do with focusing on enemy behavior and really watching what an enemy is doing so that you can react accordingly, whether you just need to just back up like this or strafe out of the way of something, or if it's really coming fast and there's a huge AoE kind of notification on the ground that, hey, by the way, this area is going to get slammed with some sort of crazy fire attack sometime soon, and then you really have to do the quick dodge out of the way. That, you know, sort of applies for events in the world. In large-scale events and things like that, it's easy to lose track of kind of what's going on in a fight. But I played through Ascalonian Catacombs, which is the first dungeon in the game that unlocks at 30, essentially. And, man, that is a totally different experience. You really have to know what you're doing, and that made me really appreciate the diversity of the Guardian skill set. So I have a whole bunch of different weapons I can equip. Right now I have a 2-handed hammer, which gives me a couple of cool abilities, which come in more handy when you're trying to do some crowd control. So, ooh, I'm getting hit by a cannon. By the way, there's one of those AoE effect fields. You can see that I probably should have gotten out of there instead of just getting destroyed by this cannon. So I'm going to try to take it out. But you can see there's a lot of depth to the system. For instance, I do basically a 3-chain attack with... Who was hitting me? That guy. With this. So the first attack is just going to do damage like that. Then I have a second attack. Then this third attack comes in, and that actually drops an AoE effect on the ground. So it's, if I let it actually combo up there, then you can see that it creates a symbol on the ground that gives protection to me and my allies. So that's giving us, you know, damage reduction, essentially. So letting my guy proceed to that 3-hit combo has more of a benefit than just like, oh, you did another hit and did damage. Oh my god, Iron, I need to mine it. And then, I mean, Mighty Blow here is my second one, so that's just damage. That's pretty straightforward. But then, like I was talking about crowd control, Zealot's Embrace here will send out a wave toward my foe that immobilizes them in a line. So, oh, my inventory's full. Well, now I'm just going to use the greatest button of all time, deposit collectibles, and there we go. All my crafting ingredients are back in my bank. Very, very convenient. But yeah, that kind of crowd control comes in really handy in a dungeon if you need to create some space between you and an enemy. Also, Vanish. This will slam an enemy backwards, so I can walk up to this guy and hit Banish and do this. And there he goes. And then I can follow up with something like Ring of Warding, which will actually stop him from passing. So you can see how this can be extremely effective. I mean, it doesn't last very long, and that seems to be a common theme amongst Guild Wars skills, is they're short duration, so you really have to pay attention to where and when you're going to use them, because it's not like, you know, I'm going to have that line or that circle on the ground for an entire fight. It really can only be used when necessary. Another reason that paying attention to enemy behavior is so important. A lot of warthogs around here, so maybe I'll just practice on them. That seems pretty easy. Anyway, so this whole left side of the skill bar changes completely depending on which weapon I have equipped. So it essentially creates subclasses for my character, but only this side. This side is actually more customizable. The 6th skill is always a heal, so I have unlocked my 3 heals right now. You know, there isn't a dedicated healer class in the game, so you can pick kind of what type of heal you want on here. So, you know, this heal here will block while I'm healing, so it at least, you know, lets me survive a little longer if I'm really in a desperate situation, whereas this heal will heal myself and will heal allies. So that's more in a group situation. Pretty useful. And then this Signet of Resolve will, it has a passive, so while it's on, you can see it's active here. It will cure a condition every 10 seconds. A condition is basically a debuff. It's a negative effect that an enemy can have on me. And then if I activate it, it will just heal myself. So if I'm in a social situation, I want to have this one in. Maybe I'm running around, I keep this Signet active, or have Shelter on just for myself. So there are a lot of different reasons to equip different heals. And then it gets... you can really kind of get lost in the depth of the system from here on out once you start considering these slot skills in the middle here, these 3. I'll go over to my slot skills. These are the utility skills, and here are all of them that I can learn. I haven't unlocked all of them yet, but you spend skill points up here that you earn from special challenges throughout the world. Like, for instance, by the way, this mini-map is amazing. I love this mini-map. It's so pretty, and it works so well and shows all the necessary information. It's really good. But you'll find these skill challenges, like I'm highlighting here, throughout zones you can do for skills. You also get them for leveling up. So it's pretty easy to accumulate skill points and unlock more skills, and then you can... Any 3 of these can be slotted on your bar at once. So what I have right now is AoE effects that basically remove conditions from allies and give me boons or bonuses. And this one grants protection and regeneration to allies. So I'm actually spec'd sort of as like a healer support class almost. And then I have this spirit bow that I can summon that will also, its function is basically to cure conditions on me and allies, but it has a secondary function where I can activate it and it will actually rain healing arrows down. So I create this healing area of effect, and that will destroy the bow. So the bow will go away. I have to wait for the cooldown. However, there's another customization system, the trait system, whereby I can actually trait once I level it up enough. There is a... Yeah, so I can trait it up so that a spirit weapon will actually not be destroyed when commanded. So the bow wouldn't disappear after I created that healing field. And I think that just shows off a little bit of the depth of the system, how if you find a skill combination you really like, you can, you know, really focus on that and tweak it so you're really much more effective with that skill set. And then maybe maybe I'm like, okay, well, this bow is junk, I don't really care about it anymore, and I have a couple traits in this system that, you know, you get points for traits as you level up as well in addition to the skill points, and then you build out these categories. If you don't like the particular trait modifier you have equipped, you can switch these out too. These will just, like the skills, you can just swap these around so you're not really locked into a permanent decision here. I have spirit weapons buffed so that they're pretty effective. It drops the recharge and lets them stay out for longer. So that's how I'm spec'd right now, but I could totally change that around if I want to and follow different trait lines and get different bonuses. Anyway, back to the weapon skills. So I have this two-handed staff here, which is pretty interesting because it's, you know, not something you would normally expect a giant, heavily armored warrior to use. Or, I'm sorry, not warrior, guardian. I just meant fighter. But the auto attack is kind of this AoE burst that hits up to 5 foes and just does damage. So pretty basic. You can see this Warthog is not a big fan of being hit by this, but the secondary, this Orb of Light, fires a slow-moving orb that actually has a secondary function in that it can be detonated to heal anyone in the area. So if somebody's engaged at close range with, say, this Warthog, and I launch this orb at them, it's going to do damage, but then if I hit the key again, it will blow up and actually heal my allies. So it has a secondary function there, and keeping track of those secondary functions is really important for success in combat. And part of what I like so much about the system, I mean, in the more organized areas like the dungeons, like Ascalonian Catacombs, which I've played so far, you know, initially it seems very chaotic because everyone's running around. Nobody really knows, you know, what their role is, because you can't just point to somebody and be like, hey, you're the tank. So you don't have that kind of predefined set of expectations about what you're supposed to do in those situations. But once you start to figure out what all of your skills really do, and like I was saying, those secondary effects, then you can really feel the difference once you start taking advantage of those things. Like, for instance, I was talking about crowd control. Here's another one, line of warding. So if, here, let me trigger this guy first. So I'm going to attack this Warthog, drop a line of warding, and then if he tries to come at me, or for some reason run way over there, he should be blocked by that. Oh, it ran out. Anyway, so that blocks enemy movement. And then I have a very straightforward heal on this staff too, where I kind of do this uncomfortable looking crouch and blast out healing waves all over the place. So another thing to keep in mind in a dungeon. And so one story I'll relate from the catacombs is we reached a point, we only had a 4-person group out of 5, so we really needed another, and we found ourselves in a situation where we were fighting some ranged enemies. And they had knockback, so they were destroying us all over the place. We were trying to run up close to be able to hit them, and they were just knocking us back with arrows, and it was making everything very difficult. So what I did was I equipped a couple skills here that can help out with that. I equipped, where was the second one? Wall of Reflection, and, oh, here we go, and Sanctuary. So what Sanctuary does is it forms a protective healing shelter for allies that foes and projectiles cannot enter. So here I'll just drop it on the ground. It's not huge, but again, that is protection from ranged attacks. And then I also have Wall of Reflection here. Again, doesn't last very long. I have Wall of Reflection that protects the targeted area with a Wall of Mystic Power that reflects projectiles. So again, another defense against ranged combat. There you can see if these Warthogs were able to fire projectiles. Oh, that's a friendly Warthog. You know, maybe I would be able to demonstrate that a little better. But that just shows how diverse, you know, the builds were. With just a couple of clicks, I went from basically more of a healer support role to somebody who's really geared to take on some ranged enemies. And then by swapping in different weapons, I have these aren't the only weapons I can use. I have numerous different weapon types. So, for instance, a torch, maybe. And you can mix and match, like those are two-handed weapons they have equipped, so you get the full 5 skills on the bar. You can also have offhands, which have 2 skills attached to them, and main hand weapons, such as, do I want a mace? No, actually I'm going to put a scepter in, because I think that's kind of cool. But yeah, you also have the main hands, and you can mix and match these as well, so you can find the best combination between the 3 attached to the main hand and the 2 attached to the offhand. So the scepter is more of another sort of kind of magical caster weapon. You can see me throwing these magical bolts at enemies, and then it has another immobilizing chains effect that you see right there, and then I can drop an AoE field under the target, which is the 2 skill here, that damages foes in the area repeatedly. So I have a nice combo effect there between the skills, as I can root them and then hit them with that AoE field under their feet. And combining that with my torch, that essentially gives me a fireball attack, so I can set myself on fire and then throw a fireball at an enemy and also blast fire breath at them. So that is good in a situation if I'm maybe behind, behind enemy lines, I suppose, and there are a large number of foes gathered up in front of me. I can just use that fire breath and do a lot of damage to a lot of people all at once. again, movement is so important because, you know, it's not like the same person is going to have aggro on them at all times because you don't have that one person tied to aggro. So, at least in my experience so far. So, maybe if I went up and did that fire breath thing, I'm going to incur the wrath of everyone. So, I need to quickly dodge out of the way and try to, you know, hit a heal or try to immobilize a target like that and put some distance between myself so somebody else can jump in and take over in terms of getting the enemy's attention. Another cool thing about combat that I can't really show here, but I can explain, is that anyone can revive anyone. So if I die in a dungeon, my teammates can just, and during combat, they don't have to wait for combat to be over, can just run up and start reviving me, and that actually awards experience too. So that gives a whole nother dimension to the combat, where if somebody dies, it's not necessarily the end of combat. And you can also respawn and just rejoin a fight, I've found, in dungeons.
Not the leg.
So that, you know, if your group, or if a couple people in your group are forced to respawn because nobody can just get over there and actually revive them, you know, that doesn't mean that there's a boss health reset, at least in the dungeon run I've done so far. So at the end of the skill bar here, there are also elite skills. These don't unlock until level 30. I'm level 31, so I have purchased one of them so far, which is very Norn-like. It is a bear shapeshift ability, which I can show in a second. But these are kind of your end tier skills. You can only equip one of them at once, and they're very expensive. They're 10 skill points, so I only have 7, so I can't even buy another one right now. But these are the bigger kind of game changer skills, and I'm still playing around with these to figure out kind of what is most effective in which situation. So I do have the ability to shift into a bear, which gives me a large health increase, as well as an entirely new skill bar. So here's a new skill bar I have to learn. So I'm now slashing at enemies, and this is a temporary thing, so it's only going to last 30 seconds. But I'm slashing, I'm providing AoE buffs. I can, you know, charge at foes and knock them back. I think I did a pretty good job on that Warthog there. But this is going to run out in a second. Let's see, I've got about 3 seconds left, and then it has a pretty long cooldown. So I found this to be effective if maybe I'm near death, or, you know, really need to kind of run up and take the attention of a boss or a powerful foe away from somebody else. You know, that's a good way to kind of engage in combat for me and be able to take a few hits before I'm forced to kind of run away and heal. So clearly a lot of depth to the system. I really like the amount of flexibility there about being able to change your role, which really becomes important in the dungeons because you do need to do that on the fly, and you really need to monitor, like, okay, what is this enemy doing? How can I best combat this? Which weapon should I have equipped? You know, it's never just, oh, I'll just use the same weapon the whole time and it'll be super boring, which is sort of the case in the overworld. Like, you can get by with, I mean, these enemies really, I mean, they're warthogs. They're, like, they're pretty easy. So in a lot of these situations, you don't have to worry about this kind of stuff, but when you do get into that more organized combat, you really need to pay attention more to the specifics of the system, and I think that once you get over that initial kind of learning curve and really get familiar with the capabilities of your class, it starts to show how strong the class design in the game really is. And so I'm really enjoying the more I play, the way the class is, the Guardian in particular, is built, and the flexibility there, so I never feel like I'm pinned into a specific role. You know, I can switch over to that two-handed hammer if I'm tired of doing this kind of casting ranged combat. It just really depends who I'm playing with and what that particular boss is doing. Or I can switch over to this giant two-handed sword, which is great for just doing tons of damage and setting a field on the ground and doing crazy spin attacks that combo with the field. Oh, I didn't even mention combos. I should probably do that. There are also combo fields that you can put on the ground, which comes in various types, like the Symbol of Wrath, for instance, that allows for... It damages and burns foes while active, so there you go. That is a combo field, a light combo field, and I can self-combo with that, and with this spinning attack, which is a combo finisher. So that's a whole other element to combat that I'm still learning exactly how that works, but I assume if you're using voice communication or something like that with a third-party program, you know, that's the type of thing that you really want to focus on for something like explorable mode dungeons. which are really the harder versions, the more challenging versions of the dungeons. You initially play them in a story mode, which is meant more for pickup groups. Then you can transition back to the same thing in explorable mode, which isn't the exact same setup. Some new paths will open, the dungeon will change, it will become much more challenging. But I have yet to see that. Again, review in progress, so I am still playing and will be providing more updates as I continue to go. So for ongoing coverage of Guild Wars 2 post-launch, you can keep checking back with IGN.